A very good afternoon to you. We're coming to you live from Melrose Arch, as Alicia has just alluded to. It's a special kind of G20 segment we have for you here on SA Today. We are live in Melrose Arch where the Media 20, that's the M20, is happening. Just bringing together journalists, editors, policymakers, as well as voices, global voices from civil organizations. Important discussions being had here, and of course, critical conversations around information integrity. It does come at a time where there are funding model challenges, as Alicia has alluded to. Shrinking newsrooms also comes at a time where there is mis and disinformation. So really the critical question is, how do we protect information integrity at a time where there are all of these challenges, including, of course, AI-generated deep fakes? Well, and on the back of the screen here, if you can see it, is what the panelists are currently seeing downstairs, where all of the conversations are taking place. In fact, any moment now, there is going to be a roundtable discussion around the declarations that are going to then be taken to the Leaders Forum. That's all happening in November, as you know. So a number of key inputs then will be tabled in that declaration. So it'll be very important to see then what all those focus areas are. But I'm not alone. I'm now joined by SABC specialist research, and that's Avelimseni Mtiane. Aveli, a very good afternoon to you. So, of course, we've been tracking, this particular summit for over 2 days now. I mean, it is really our turf in terms of media space, but critical, important information coming out, talking about, media and information integrity. Just speak to us as we take our viewers to some of the graphics about just some of the key points in terms of what are the important things that delegates are looking at.
Good afternoon to you, Unathi, and good afternoon to the viewers. Look, Unathi, a number of important topics have been discussed here, but I think key among those discussions is the point of reliable information analysis, which keeps a citizen informed in a manner that empowers them, other than the manner that disempowers them, so that the truth and the integrity of the information that they receive is very much important. Another point is the fact that the public service media, as opposed to trending issues, provides that platform where citizens can go to get reliable information, which is not influenced by any form of political interference or commercial interference, where there is just pure information with integrity, with an aim to empower the citizen and to make sure that the protection of our democracy thrives at a level whereby the information, the ecosystem of the information is available for the citizen to be able to go there and get the information. But also, if we can move to the next point, is that other issue that has been discussed here, Unathi, is the issue of the artificial intelligence that has happened, and at some point in time is that it affects the news, because it's very much good because it empowers journalists, for instance, to make sure that they have enough time when it comes to data processing. For instance, if some of the story is data-driven, it helps because journalists are empowered in that manner. However, there is also a negative side of things, and we will recall that Advocate Pensi Itlakula, who's the chairperson of the Information Regulator of South Africa, spoke about how artificial intelligence at some point becomes the key cornerstone of how those who want to manipulate the information, they use it for deep fakes and also for other ulterior motives when it comes to videos and video editing and so forth. So it is very much important to keep the ecosystem of the news and the information as pure, and it takes that this gathering will advocate for such issues, and such declarations will have to be made. Another key point is the issue of the public, of the funding of the public interest media. We know that, as you have rightfully said, there are shrinking newsrooms, and journalists, we see them being affected. Some are being killed when they are reporting on the story. So the protection of journalists and also the funding of the public interest media has been one of the key issues that have been discussed here.
I'll be discussing with my panel in a short while. But we speak then about artificial intelligence, Veli. I know that you also have a slide that unpacks, some of the dangers of artificial intelligence. We do know, like you said, it does and it can enable journalists to do their work, but in a truth-seeking environment, in a democratic environment, what are some of those dangers?
Sure. The issue of spreading of disinformation and misinformation and weaponization of information to achieve some ulterior motives is the biggest one here, because at the end of the day, the artificial intelligence is here to empower people, but we know that sometimes it can be wrongfully used. So in this instance, I think there is a voice that says artificial intelligence is good, we must lead it, it must not lead us.
Okay, Billy, thank you so much. Let's leave it there for that now. Was Vilimseni Tiane, SABC News specialist, researcher for the G20 special. Of course, now what is important is that we are going to have this conversation with our panelists. Let's very quickly then get you an introduction of who I'll be speaking to. I have Amy Mitchell, Executive Director, Center for News, Technology and Innovation, as well as Siddharth Varadarajan from the Wire India News Agency. In fact, I'm going to take a seat as I join them now and continue with this conversation. Thank you so much to you both, and a very good afternoon to you. Of course, we're discussing a number of key issues here, and it's quite important to see what some of those issues will come out to be, particularly when you look at the declaration. Siddharth, I want to start with you. I mean, just having those interesting conversations also, I want you to just take us to your environment, of course. Journalists under pressure from disinformation we've just heard now, shrinking newsrooms. How is the newsroom, in terms of information integrity, affected where you're from? Of course, your challenges from India, particularly from the Wire India News Agency. Just perhaps, just bring us to your confidence in terms of the challenges and the threat to democracy, if any, that you can speak to.
I think the key factor is the relationship between information integrity and media freedom. Right. So information integrity, the phrase that is current these days, it's figured prominently in our discussions at the M20. Refers to the reliability of information that is in the public domain, and the reason this phrase has assume such a great importance is precisely because we are awash with all kinds of information flows, a lot of disinformation, a lot of misinformation, and a lot of this sort of dodgy information flows are the product not of random ill-informed people, but actually of industrial scale disinformation campaigns being run by political vested interests, right? So we are awash with, there are ongoing attacks on information integrity, and this compromises everything, right? It affects a citizen's ability to understand what's happening in her society. It affects the relationship between people and their ability to hold their governments accountable and so on. And media freedom comes in because it's only when you empower and guarantee the ability for professional news organizations to function, and you don't sort of trample over their freedoms, that you can erect a credible line of defense against all of these attacks on information integrity. So there is a very close relation, as in many other democracies. We have guarantees of press freedom on paper under the Constitution. In reality, political parties, governments in power, are resorting to all kinds of methods in order to put pressure on the media and in order to ensure that we don't do our job and ask the tough questions. Right? And so that attack on press freedom, I think, is also what is creating the space for information integrity to be compromised.
Amy, let me bring you into the conversation then. Especially in light of what we are talking about as it relates to press freedom. Artificial intelligence in many ways can also help in
but there are a number of challenges.
But there are a number of deepfakes becoming cheaper too, also threatening on press freedom. What is your view around AI, and how do we start to frame that? And when we speak about government and even different countries, what kind of frameworks would help, in terms of protecting that area of journalism, particularly when it comes to information integrity?
Well, I think Siddharth put out very nicely the juxtaposition and the need to think about, information integrity and where we are today with our society in terms of press freedoms being compromised in an increasing number of countries around the world, including in democracies. And so both at the same time, we have more and more information in the mix of our digital system. Figuring out how to sift through that becomes extremely important. As the press media itself, those who are trying to get the factual reports out, are facing more threats and attacks from both inside and outside of governments in their country. So it's really important, and one of the main thrusts around the M20 is to ensure that as political leaders are coming together to talk about the important critical issues to address in a coming year, that this question of information systems, safeguarding an independent press, and the public's open access to a plurality, a diverse mix of news and information is top of mind. There are many other industries that have their voices in the mix, and it's important that media and information become a part of it.
All right, Amy, I want you to hold that thought. I will come back to you in a moment. But for now, I want us to take a quick break. Of course, there are a number of developing, issues happening here. We're listening to some of those conversations. There's, in this room that I'm sitting at, a number of media also reporting about what is happening here. But we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back straight afterwards to continue to engage with our guests. Stay with us. Hello again, and thank you so much for staying with us. We are still at the M20 Summit. This is part of our G20 Focus here on SA Today. I continue a conversation with my guests. So we have Amy Mitchell, Executive Director, Center for News, Technology and Innovation, as well as Mr. Siddharth Varadarajan from the Wire India News Agency. Interesting conversations that are being had here today. Virat, Siddharth, let me just continue then with you, just in terms of the conversation that we were having about information integrity. I mean, when you look at AI, governments talk about trying to improve and censor and see if they can aid in, disinformation and tackle it. But some critics are seeing this and viewing this as some form of censorship. How do we frame the assistance that government and the role that government plays here?
That's a great question. Essentially, what we are seeing right now is around the world, governments saying that there is an urgent need to tackle disinformation and the use of AI for furthering disinformation. The problem arises when governments use this as an alibi to create rules, regulations, restrictions that will then be used in some cases against legitimate media, right? So, and what we see is in some of these countries, the problem of fake news, problem of disinformation, very often originates with the same political parties, the same governments, the same leaders, who then, having weaponized fake news to serve their political ends, say we need to have regulations to control fake news, and what they really want to do is put in place restrictions on media that they don't like. So that's why this concept of information integrity is so crucial, because you cannot have information integrity, you cannot guarantee it if you do not have a free media. So anything that restricts the functioning of media independence will make the problem of fake news worse. And I think this is something that we have to underline repeatedly.
And I want to bring you in, Amy, as you probably also respond to what Siddharth is saying. You are based in the US, but you do cover, in the main, global media houses. When we look at self-regulation, there are concerns that it could very easily become self-censorship, especially when you look at the geopolitics that are currently happening now. Media in the US, I would imagine, are also under immense pressure.
Yes, very new. Way that's very new to our country, at least in recent years. And we were just hearing in the ambassadors' session, what was just prior to this interview here, as they were talking about the importance of figuring out how to balance regulation with freedom of expression and a free news media. It's really hard. And CNTI did a study that looked at 32 pieces of fake news policy around the world, as Siddharth was just talking about. And what we saw was that even in democracies, in many cases, those policies in the end ended up creating more risk and indeed imprisonment for journalists and control of information than they did in safeguarding information integrity. When a law gets passed, it is really critical that there is a way to safeguard that independence of the news media and the access to information.
And that's a very important point because what is then contained in the declaration that is currently being discussed now becomes very important, isn't it? Because when you look at some of the call to action to various governments, I mean, how comfortable or confident are you that some of these declarations will be implementable, especially by problematic countries, if I can say?
I mean, the declaration is a very thoroughgoing document that addresses a whole bunch of issues that concern media freedom, that concern the functioning of media safety, for example, safety of journalists. We have expressed our collective concern, for example, at the deliberate targeting of Palestinian journalists in Gaza by the Israeli army. More than 200 of our colleagues have been killed, and we want the G20 to take some action on this. We are concerned about, the relationship between between big platforms, big tech, and media. We are concerned about the use of slap suits and other forms of lawfare against journalists around the world. So these are concerns that we are flagging. Now, obviously, a lot, it's the nature of the beast, right? That a lot of the problems that the media faces today, is because of governments and governments placing restrictions, governments not wanting journalists to do their job. So your question is valid. I mean, we are going to be submitting our declaration to the G20 people and say, look, please factor this in. Will they do it? I don't know. I think a lot of it will not be very well received. But I think it's up to the public. It's up to the kind of pressure that the media around the world can create, and through media coverage to actually educate wider publics that these are issues that are really important.
Do you want to respond to that, perhaps?
I would just say I also think it's important to, what's most important to come out of this is that the issues surrounding information integrity and a free press and a safe and secure press is what is most important to communicate beyond any very specific call or, enumerated item in there. But to be sure that this is a part of these global conversations is really critical today. Our digital information system is global. We operate at in a global way now. And so it's very important, just as the M20 group is global, that we ensure that these conversations also get taken into the other bodies of global organizations.
We're soon going to be wrapping. I want to pose this last question to the both of you, just as our parting shot. So they always say that rather work with things that are within your control first. In the face of AI and AI-generated fake news, fact-checking, ethical journalism has been touted as the solution. Let me start with you. What do you think that, in the light and in the face of AI that is fast generating fake news, what is within media's control now, before we even start talking about other solutions that emanate from other parties like government?
Well, one of the things that we talked about a little bit yesterday in the session I was in was the importance to think about the public and the role that the public and both public literacy, but also public awareness of the role that journalism plays in society. And journalism writ large has had a hard time communicating, and the journalists that we surveyed in our international journalists say this as well, in communicating the value and the role that they play in society. People have a general sense of it, but to really gain that understanding and communicate that is step one. As that happens, then figuring out how can the public sift through this different information that they're going to come across regardless and make sense of what's really accurate or not. And the last thing I would say is that it also depends on the public wanting to find that factual information.
And so that, let's end with you. Fact-checking, ethical journalism, are they the only solutions?
We value media freedom if media organizations themselves are willing to abide by the highest professional standards and highest degree of transparency. So readers, viewers need to have confidence in the work that we do. So obviously, fact-checking, being transparent about how we are crafting our stories is absolutely essential. Obviously, there needs to be greater introspection within. And I think a lot of what we discussed and a lot of the declaration is also aimed at media organizations themselves to do, right? But the bigger picture is that, in the context of G20, that there's no hope of solving all the major problems that the G20 says it wants to solve if you are going to suppress media freedom. If you're not going to allow journalists to do their job, you're making it much more difficult for yourself to solve the kind of problems that need to be solved.
I want to thank you both. We've come up to the end of the show. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. Of course, those were our guests, Amy Mitchell, Executive Director, Center for News, Technology and Innovation, as well as Siddharth Varadarajan from the Wire India News Agency. So as the M20 wraps up here in Melrose Arch in Johannesburg, it's clear there are a number of questions in terms of the fight for information integrity is also a fight for democracy itself. So we'll continue, of course, to have these conversations in the lead up and the run up to the Leaders G20 Summit in November. From me, Unathi, and the team here, it's goodbye.